How's everyone doing? Thanks for joining me on my small engine repair channel. Today's project is this Troy Bilt self-propelled push mower with a Tecumseh engine, and I just purchased this used from a guy for $30. He said that the only problem is that it's probably got bad gas in it and it won't start. So let's take a look at it, see if our $30 investment is going to pay off. Alright guys, so first thing I'm going to do is just check some of the basics. I'm going to go ahead and check the fuel, see if there's any fuel in there. I don't see any fuel in there. I'll check the oil level. Oil looks not too bad actually. Check the air filter, and the air filter does not look great, but then the next thing I'll do is I see something going on here. Looks like, alright, so this cover just wasn't on right, and you can see it's actually been burnt by the exhaust. The spark plug back on. I just removed that for transport. Alright, so the next thing I think I'm going to do, guys, is spray some carb spray into the carburetor and pull it and see if we can get this thing to fire up. So I'm actually going to use some of this quick start. I'll spray a bunch in to the carburetor and let's pull it over and see what we get. Alright, so I do think that this thing just, I got lucky here. I do think that it just used up whatever fuel was left in the carb bowl and then died off. Now it was kind of sputtering and popping a little bit, so maybe the carburetor needs to be cleaned. If you want to learn how to clean out one of these Tecumseh carburetors, and they're all pretty much the same, I'll go ahead and pop up a link into the top right corner here now, and you can go ahead and figure out how I clean one of these guys. So looks like the crankcase vent tube is actually not put back on here either. So anyways, so where am I going to take this? So another thing I notice here as well is the self-propel does work, but it's very weak, so I need to adjust it. But when I was looking at it, I see that there is a massive cable issue here, so that is likely going to be a deal breaker for this thing as far as self-propel, just because those cables are probably not cheap. I'm going to look it up and see. I'm going to use this Troy Bilt model number. It looks very much like an MTD number, 12AD 565T563. Probably going to be an MTD part, and but I suspect this is probably going to be a 30 or 40, maybe even more dollar cable. So I think I'm going to probably just sell it as is. Alright, I'm going to come up with a game plan, and then we're going to figure out where we're going to take this thing. Alright guys, so the plan was just to put some more fuel in there and run it and see how it ran. But before I did that, I wanted to drop this carb bowl to see on the inside of it how bad it was. there was just a little bit of residual fuel left in there, and wasn't too bad. Cleaned that out. The bowl gasket is it's okay. It's not great, but it's pliable at least. I also cleaned out this bowl nut. There's holes. There's a hole right here that goes across to the other side, and then there's a small little hole here and a small hole at the end in here. So I cleaned that up. But one thing I did notice that I want to show you guys is, take a look at, you're not going to be able to see it on this camera. I'm going to have to take this off. This float is filled 100% with fluid. So that would cause the carburetor to constantly be filling up with fuel, and it usually either leaks out this way or leaks out that way. And if it goes this way, usually it ends up mixing in with the oil. So I don't know if, because the oil wasn't overfilled and it didn't smell like gas. So because what happens is, when this thing is full, when the bowl fills up with fluid, it's supposed to push this up and cut off the fuel. I'm going to try and reach in there and grab the pin that holds the float on. Here, give me a look. Okay, so here's the float pin. And there's your needle. And there's the float. So take a look at the float. You can see the air bubble floating around in there. So it's 98% filled with fuel or water or some fluid. So that means that we have a leaky float. Alright guys, so I got myself a new used float. Put the needle valve back on, and you got to get the needle up into the area where the seat goes, which this is going to be a hard thing to do again, because it's, when you work on these things, they're all right side up. Right now it's upside down. Okay, I think we're in business here. Sorry if I'm blocking you, I just need to see what I'm doing here. Get this float pin back in. Okay. I think I'm going to put a little grease on this. That'll help it kind of stick. It's hard because I'm trying to do this by feel, and it's just tough to do when you're doing something by feel. Yeah, I'm not sure. Here we go. Okay. Looks like we're in business here. What? one last thing I'm going to do as well is I'm going to take out the idle jet, which is right here. Sometimes there's a little black or white cap that's over top of that. You can just kind of use a pick to pull that cap off, so they don't want us messing with this, I guess, which I don't usually mess with, but I always like to make sure it's nice and clean. Just like the other jet, there are some small holes. There's a small hole that goes through both sides here, and then a really small hole that goes through the top. So you want to make sure that this is not clogged up. And I'll use a little thin bread tie to try and poke through these little holes. So I just poked the holes out of there. The top, that little dinky hole was actually clogged. So I poked through that hole, and then I sprayed some carb cleaner through the tip of it, and it came out those bigger holes on the side. So I know now it's a nice free passageway there. So now I'm going to put it down, put some fuel in it, and we'll see how it runs now. Alright guys, let me show you where I'm at with this thing. I put some fresh fuel in there, and then I went to try and prime it, and I noticed that it was not shooting any primer fuel into the carburetor. So then I took the float bowl off again and noticed that there wasn't any fuel in the float bowl. So with the float in the down position, that opens up the needle valve, and it should allow fuel to drip out. So when I unpinch this fuel line like so, this thing should be pouring fuel from that back needle valve, and there's nothing coming out. So that's where I'm at with it. What I'm going to try and do, so what I'm going to try next is to try and see, kind of work my way backwards on that fuel line to see if there's actually fuel coming out of the fuel line. And if that's the case, then I know I have a problem with the needle and seat. So I'll try and take this fuel line off. Oh, that's lovely. So this guy came off. That's not a big deal. So as you can see, there's only dribbles of fuel coming out. So there's definitely an issue with this fuel line. It's probably either collapsed in on itself or something to that effect. So I think there's got to be a clogged fuel filter in the fuel tank, or this fuel line itself is no good. So I think what I'm going to do, the easiest thing will probably be to replace the fuel line on this thing. So there is fuel flowing right now, but as soon as I lift it up, I don't know if you can see back here, you can see where that fuel line is kind of pinched in on itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace this fuel line with some new fuel line. Alright guys, so I've replaced this fuel line. Alright, and I still have the clamps on there, so the moment of truth is going to be whether or not we see fuel coming from the needle and seat area. So I'm just going to get hopefully something that's going to catch fuel when I release this thing. Yeah, and unfortunately, no fuel. Alright, so I thought that was going to be our problem. It does not look like that is the case. Alright, so I got everything back together. I just kind of played around with the inlet into the carburetor and the fuel line itself and its positioning, and now, as you'll see, there's actually fuel coming out, dripping there. So I'm going to go ahead and put it all back together and drop it down and see where we get. Alright, let's give this a try. The primer, I did check the primer, it is working. Yeah. Should be plenty of fuel in there. Now what do we got going on here? Alright, let's see what we got. See if we got any spark. Well, the plug is definitely wet. I wonder if I flooded it. I don't see any. Well, let's see if we got any spark. There's definitely spark there. Huh. Let's put some fluid right in the combustion chamber. Guys, so the thing's running really rough. I believe what's going on is it's running really rich, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to go ahead and cover up some of the airflow going into the carburetor through the air filter area, that's actually going to make this thing run even worse, and you'll see black smoke coming out just when I cover up just a little bit of air. So to me that means it's too rich. If it was too lean when I covered that up, then that would mean it would run smoother. The other reason I think it's running too rich is I'll block off the fuel hose and limit the amount of fuel going into the carburetor itself, which means there'll be less fuel in the bowl, and it'll actually start to run smoother before it dies, runs out of fuel. Got to give it a minute or two. There you go. It's actually running very smooth right now. So there's definitely something wrong with this carburetor. Run out of fuel just because I blocked off the fuel line there. So I'm not sure. I think I might have to replace this carburetor, or at least take it apart, see if I can see anything obvious, and if not, then I'll just replace it with one I know works, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, so I got a new carburetor put on this new used carburetor. I swapped out the float bowl from the old carburetor because it was red, kind of matched the paint. I put a new primer bulb on here now, so the primer works, and let's give it a try, see if this is going to work. Alright, so this one's got a bit of a misfire too. It could be the spark plug, I guess, but it's pretty rare. So I think I'm going to leave it as is, and you know, maybe sell it as is for, I don't know, 60 or 80 bucks. The self-propel works. I'm not going to clean it up and do my full you know, refurbishment from top to bottom, but you know what, for $80 for a self-propelled mower, maybe it misfires every so often. I find that quite a bit more with the Tecumsehs than the Briggs & Stratton. That's why I like Briggs & Stratton a little bit better. But anyways, for what it is, you know, 80 bucks, that's probably a good little mower, last somebody a year or two. So anyways guys, hopefully this was helpful for you, and hopefully you enjoyed the content. If you did, please go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe button down below. It really helps me out on the channel. Until our next project, take care.